Cloaked in the shadows.
Okay, Amanda, what are we doing today?
We're doing Cloaked in the Shadows.
What is Cloaked in the Shadows?
It's a podcast where we cover paranormal and anything that people want to talk about that's out of the ordinary.
We've got a gentleman with us today as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
And I've known this gentleman for a few years now. He's recently just been on Spoken Label as well, but we had such a hoot meeting this gentleman. We want to get him back on to let him show people more of his wide range, definitely. So we've got the wonderful and utterly bonkers, and he's a good friend of mine, the wonderful Eric Loveland Heath. Now, Eric, obviously, give people a quick introduction about yourself, and then we'll just go through it, actually.
Okay. Well, I'm many things. Many things to many people. I often say. I'm a musician. I've been writing music on my own since probably about 2006. In a serious way, I've been in a number of bands. I also do a little bit of writing, which I spoke on Spoken Label. So I do a little bit of short story writing. In my day-to-day job, I work in policy. I work in strategy stuff. So I do lots of local government and some national government stuff. So I guess a bit of a range of things and interests. But mostly the undercurrent of all these interests, I'd say, is I live in the countryside. I have done since I was very young, and I think the thing about living, I've lived in Shropshire, and I'm just over in the border in Powys now, and then there's so much folklore around. There's so many stories and customs and things that I'm aware of, and so I've collected these. I think I've kept a record. I've also been quite keen on the idea of misremembered or made up mythology. I think so much of it's kind of messed up anyway.
Mythology isn't it? It's like it's word of mouth.
It's its own myth.
It's own myth, yeah. They often gets mistranslated half the time. Definitely, that's why we wanted to get you on today. Talking about mythology and some of the stories you know. Granny, you're a great storyteller.
Yeah, so a number of different types of stories I'm quite aware of. I mean, I grew up in Snail Beach, which is a mining village. It was the largest lead mine in Shropshire. I wrote an album about it. But I mean, that was more about coming. I'd lived there till I was 16 and moved away. Then I came back at 26 and went, oh, all right, this is what coming back to a place is like. And I wanted to catch the memories of it, but also how it seemed now. So there was a lot going on about. I just think it's the start of hauntology, really. It was sort of ghost books and everything like that. And I was really into that. I was into this sort of hazy memory of something, but then the fresh kind of perspective of it. So I went to school in a tiny school up in the hills, and I was so aware that someone's back garden was falling in. There was a mine shaft called Black Tom, because the operator used to have a great big beard. There's a whole story about people. I think it was a number of miners who also had other jobs, but it's George's Shaft that I wrote a song about that as well. But the rope was used too often. It wasn't checked, and it fell, and the cage fell, and the cage when it landed, was significantly shorter. And one of the people's watches, I think, was either still going or had stopped exactly at that point. So I was very much aware of those kind of things. But then there was also this crazy story of Wild Edric, who's a headless horseman who goes on the top of the Stiperstones, the Devil's Chair. And the name of my school was Stiperstones. And Stiperstones is a rocky outcrop on the top of some moorland, really. So I lived just a few miles away from incredibly rural kind of. I mean, it seems a bit like parts of really rural Yorkshire, that kind of denseness and lack of perspective. We used to do sponsors walks and runs up there, and there's a rock up there called the Devil's Chair, which goes. Which is supposed to be where the devil sits when the mist is up. So I mean, yeah, but then there's an even better story about why the Devil's Chair is there, which is the devil was he was going to go to, so he was trying to go to Wales to basically dump a load of stones on them because they're heathens, because they're non-conformists, as if the devil really cares. But he was carrying the rocks in an apron. And the apron strings snapped because of the weight, and then they dropped there. And he couldn't be bothered to pick them up. So yeah.
What do you believe that story?
Maybe.
Probably more believable than the Wrekin being a giant trying to go and throw rocks at Shrewsbury and then deciding to getting tricked and just dumping them where the Wrekin is. You know, devils, giants. Why not?
Oh, brilliant stories like that. So, did you said you got all this interest. Were you interested in this when you were very young? On later on, like this big interest in mythology and myths?
I'm not really sure that. I remember listening to a lot of stories, and I was fascinated with stories that were. I mean, the Little Matchstick Girl is one that absolutely destroyed me every time. I mean, that is a terribly sad story, which also, in a weird way, is utterly beautiful because she finds peace. All she experiences in life is just misery, and reject. And then
do you ever tell people who don't know the story what?
Yeah,
I have heard of that story.
The Little Matchstick Girl, yeah, she's an orphan. I think her grandma has died as well, who was looking after her, and so she's forced to go around in Victorian England and sell matchsticks because you weren't allowed to beg, so you had to sell something. You sold a matchstick, and the people they would give you some money, but she's constantly rejected. And so she's going around, and it's incredibly cold, and so she starts lighting the matches to try and keep warm, and eventually she just dies. But then, in a strike of luck, she is reunited with the people who love her. So it's a heartwarming story, which takes a very, very long time to become heartwarming. But then there was also Stig the Dump, which was a brilliant story of like a modern myth, and the BFG as well. Why not? My grandma, I'll bring a little bit of something else into the mix. My grandma was from America, from the States. I mean, I was born there as well, and she brought back these incredible books. There's one called Millions of Cats, which is an incredibly famous, probably the most successful book ever sold in America, and the illustrations are incredible. They're just these beautiful pen and ink illustrations of lots and lots of cats, and the myth there is that all the cats just swarm basically across the landscape, eat everything, and that they kill each other, and then these two old people are left with just one, and that one is pure and sweet. Then there was another story. There were Heath Robinson books. That's kind of into invention, kind of ideas and fallacies. But yeah, I can't remember quite which one it was. That is really annoying me now. I had it in front of me. There's some from Romania. So she collected quite a lot of different stories and a lot of different things. If I can remember it, I'll come back to it.
Didn't you say? Obviously, one thing when we've spoken label recently as well. I know we got halfway through a story, didn't we, on the Martyr Knot, and this is where we do a cutting crossover now.
Yeah.
What we did on Monday was we mentioned it and spoken label. We said we're going to come back to it on the spot. Spoken label, we didn't because we forgot. So should we tell people a bit about that then?
Yeah, sure. What was called the Ohms Martineau was an instrument that was created by Maurice Martineau, a cellist, if I remember correctly, who wanted to effectively create the entire string section of an orchestra in one instrument. So what he did is he created a sort of an instrument with a movable keyboard. Then it was a ring on a piece of cord slung between two pulleys. So it was an electronic instrument. It worked on the principle of where the ring was, i.e. tension. Then created a frequency, a voltage that then increased the frequency. So you could play it. It's monophonic, so it could only play one note, but it would play that note, and you could play between notes. So a bit like a cello or violin, you can just go up, there's no frets, so you can just go in between notes, or what we know as Western notation. So yeah, he created that, but then he turned up at this, I don't know if this is even true, but I remember reading it, and I hope it's true. They both turned up he and Leon Theremin, who created the theremin, which was he was trying to make the radio range a bit larger, a bit wider, and got it wrong, and ended up creating this instrument that could play. It could play a note according to where your hand is in the electromagnetic field around the aerial or the antenna, and they both apparently brought their instruments to the same exhibition or international expo thing, and went, oh, you've basically created the same idea as me, but in a different way. So one's a keyboard-based, almost sort of a physical instrument. The other one's playing in the air.
I'm just going under a picture of this now.
It's bonkers, isn't it?
It looks interesting.
The interesting thing about the Martineau is it has many different types of speakers. So it has one called the palm speaker, another called the it wasn't resonator, it was Divide or something. One's got strings on it to resonate. One's got one's a big like a gong to make a rasping sound. And what he wanted to do is enable you to go sort of down the register, and then you could be like the bass, a double bass, and you end up with this sort of rasping sound. And I got fascinated with this instrument because when I was a kid, I watched Captain Scarlet. I watched reruns of Captain Scarlet. Yeah, and it's in that. It's in the original score of Ghostbusters. So all Elmer Bernstein stuff is all over that. It's just lots of swooping. I think in the library scene you can hear it, but before the original soundtrack got replaced by all the pop songs, and then it's ended up in a lot of TV and things. Actually, I got fascinated by the sound again when I was a bit older by Midsummer Murders. So that's it's a good theme.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, I found the series a bit miserable, but yeah, it's a great theme, definitely. Now, there's a couple of things I want to touch on specifically today as well. Obviously, I'm going to do a bit of a crossover again from Spoken Label, but Amanda's not heard this story about, obviously, on your Plenty Wenlock Records, there is a single about the Black Nun, isn't there, as well? So I think that we deserve to tell that story again, definitely, about what the Black Nun is.
So the Black Nun it's a ghost that has been seen in a number of places, but around the area of Bank. Bank has obviously had quite a lot of work done around it, but there's some old churches. There's obviously the Bank of England. So it sort of goes that Sarah Whitehead was the Black Nun, a woman whose brother was a clerk at the Bank of England who was caught stealing money, I think, and he was taken away and he was executed. And she came in dressed in black in mourning to pretty much every day because she didn't know what to do, but also she used to go and see him. So it sounds like she had some sort of breakdown, and they took pity on her. But then another story goes that they told her to shoo off. So, but she's apparently seen around the platform of Bank tube station, sort of walking around some of the graveyards and things. There's a guy doing a book about it that I hope comes to light, and I'll be interested in seeing. But a fascinating story. It's one of those London myths which are really fascinating because they're mixed with technology, transport, change. I think that the fascinating thing is that there's a lot of old stories, and especially in Wales, there's lots of old stories that kind of don't go anywhere. In Shrewsbury, there's a story of obviously the Romans walking across the town walls, but the town walls are now higher. So I think it's a similar thing in Chester where they're halfway up. But in London, they have to deal with this sort of constant revision, with the ghosts being old or new. There's also a really good book. It's not really about ghosts, but there's a book called London Nobody Knows, which is by Geoffrey Fletcher, which is he keeps going around all the different parts of London that he knows that no one else does, he thinks. And he has a fascination with, I think it's Edwardian urinals. So he keeps going to and drawing them.
We've got there's a book I got the year in Manchester called Underground Manchester, and that's a very similar book that you've seen, haven't you? And that goes on all about various bits and pieces beyond the main streets of central Manchester, like it's underneath that you may not know about. There's a lot of myths and stuff about that. So yeah, I'll get a PDF and I'll send it over to you. It's worth reading that. I'll sit and get one off the right.
No, I'm absolutely fascinated about that, but it's. I think it's just the amount of change, the amount of different things, displacement. So if there are people who have experienced supernatural things, ghosts, whatever, they may not be in the right place. They might be taking place in different things.
Yeah, definitely. Amanda's originally from the Bradford area, she is, and have you got a sort of folklore story you want to tell everything about?
No, because it's not really rural areas.
No, yours
So we used to make stories up when we were younger. Like the woods was an entrance to hell and things like that.
No, absolutely. You had to. I mean, we used to make up stories about the woodland behind us, and when I lived up in Snail Beach, it's it's part of, I guess, what a way of understanding, explaining your area, and how you understand it. So the woodland was always, it's forestry commission land, but I didn't realise until I think I was 30 that there's a bike track there, a black route, a proper scary one. So no doubt people have been injured in that, but I just didn't know. So to me, it's always had that fascination and that mystery.
Yeah, it's very nice to us. I think I always believe that. And every area you go, because obviously, like, cities we're living in, the names of them go back, millenniums, don't they, really? And
that's,
things build up and time on it, definitely, with that. So, like, Chester, for example, been the Roman city, wasn't it? So.
Well, my neighbour, my neighbour's son, who's just moved back, he knows this area really well. He's grown up here, and he mentioned when we were talking just casually. So I've walked up the hill lots of times, and it's fairly new. It's actually, one of the parts is called I think it's called just New Pieces, which is just where the new trees are. Conifers have grown, and he said he'd located. He thinks he'd located the well up there where people would go for, if I remember, it's purity. So it's like it's going up there to wash your hands into early Christianity.
Whoa.
So he thinks he found it, but there's a similar one in what's the place called Myford, where up the hill you can find that, and it used to have a sort of a little building around it, and you could spend some time there. And there's a story that if you put your hands in there for long enough, it would heal them. Yeah, wells have quite a lot of significance. There's a.
We'll bring Amanda down there, and we'll throw you in.
Almost throw my whole self in.
No, she's a bit battered and broken, the Eric, so. That's why it's a bit fucking well, brilliant for that one. Now, I want to touch on next one, obviously. Unfortunately, your partner Vicky can't make it tonight, but I know you told me a story about her. She's encountered, was it ghosts? Am I right with that?
Well, we both have. We were both brought up in mining areas, so I'm sure Vicky wouldn't mind me mentioning that she grew up in a very old house. For a while in a place called St George's in Shropshire, in what is now Telford, and it was right on top of a mining, a massive mining area called Granville Colliery. So a lot of the buildings were mines buildings. The houses were built on the area. I mean, I think that place is so big it even goes up underneath a retail park. But it was massive. And according to Ben Holton from Every45, he's gone walking around Granville Colliery, which is apparently a park you can go, and I've not been there yet. But yeah, she I think you could lift the floorboards up and look straight down a mine shaft. It's terrifying. But she was lying, she opened her eyes, she was lying on her side, and she stared straight into the eyes of a woman who looked both, I think, terrified and angry, who was lying there, just on the bed, who was evidently the person who'd lived there before. And then a little bit later, I think Vicky was told that the woman had died there. But yeah, she wasn't like a scary ghost. It was just an awkward and quite scary experience. But she was just trying. It appeared like she was trying to work out why someone else was there, or maybe couldn't even quite judge it properly. But yeah, so Vicky's very much of the mind that she's seen ghosts. I mean, in our house, she says she's seen half a man walk, the bottom half of a man walk out of I think it is the bottom half out of my studio room. She's seen a shadowy cat, and I saw it as well run around the corner of the desk. So I don't know what it is, but yeah.
Bottom half of man sounds very freaky. That one.
That's seen like the whole of it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Vicky thinks he's because this house was built just after the war, after the Second World War. So we think he's the first inhabitant, but he just seems to want to go in and out of that room because I guess it was the master bedroom and he wanted to be in that room. So yeah, a bit awkward.
Yeah, it's like you always say with ghost stories, something like that, it can be like snapshots of the past and stuff. Why only half a man? That's why I can't get my head around with that. Was it a house bombed or something?
I just don't know if we're able to focus on him, but it just seems to be just he's part of him, just a bit of him, just walking through. It's not like the BBC series Ghosts, where exactly half a man exists or something. It's that you see something move, and then out the corner of your eye, you see it, and then you try and focus, and it's gone. But that room there had quite a lot of. Yeah, it seems to have had its fair share of bad experiences in it. Just kind of bad feeling in it. I'm not going to say energy, but it just doesn't feel like there's been much love in there.
Yeah. We've got two friends, Dave and Catherine, who listen to this podcast actually, and they were on our first show back in the year, and they've seen a haunted cat before. No one else does. An old cat they used to have. And actually see that knocking around. So yeah, I've heard that sort of thing with the cats before, certainly.
Well, we had a cat when we lived up in Sale Beach. We had a cat called Bertie. He hadn't made a single sound in his life. He growled, but he didn't ever meow. And he didn't make a noise to the point that he got locked in the coal. It's not a cellar. Coal cupboard, because it was a coal-fired place. And he was in there for 3 days and didn't make a sound. He just sat there waiting. It was incredible. And then one night we just kept hearing this meow, just this sound, and he wouldn't have made that noise. He couldn't have. And we'd lost a cat a little bit before, and so I guess for that had a ghost cat in the outhouse there, but he wouldn't have made the noise. He just didn't make anything. So that was the first thing I heard really. But I'm not like an avid believer, or I'm not a skeptic. I'm just kind of, I just take things as they go. So I quite enjoy the idea that horror and the mythology and everything, I can take it and just let it be. I don't need to believe in something, but but I'm interested in the stories about it. And if I've obviously seen a few weird things, but then I judge that because I don't think we all see things differently, we all experience things differently. There's no common reality that we all experience.
Yeah, of course, I agree, mate. Now, I do know, obviously, like him, you've got a very interesting T-shirt on today as well. People can't see this.
Well, I can't really wear this T-shirt out. It freaks people out too much.
Yeah.
It's a plague doctor. It's from the plague. So the plague doctors were the people who used to go around with this sort of weird beak. It was a leather kind of nose thing, and what they did is they filled it with sweet-smelling herbs because it obviously was a horrible smell. But they absolutely terrify me. They look like some sort of weird, like a raven, like a demented raven. So yeah, I'm wearing that. I thought I'd get into the spirit, the folklore spirit.
Good for that one straight away. Now, then one of the main things I want to touch on today, and you were reading an extract, but you wanted to read an extract out from a book, didn't you, as well? About was it the Green Man, wasn't it?
Yeah. There's there's lots talked about the Green Man. I'm not really going to talk too much about the Green Man, other than the kind of fascination with the concept. I mean, we've got lots of green men around the house, around the garden. It's a great symbol. There's a Green Man festival nearby, which is fantastic, actually, in Clun, in which the Green Man has to fight the Ice Queen every year. Otherwise, there will be no summer in the Valley of Clun. And luckily, he always wins. So it used to be held on a bridge, and where people would stand in the river, but then they've had to move it. But yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, they'd have things like fire breathing and lots of little kids dressed up as ice demons or whatever, and then he'd fight. So yes, I found a bit in a book, Reading the Paranormal, which I think would be quite a good example of how I'm fascinated with the supernatural aspect of things. Why I guess I go for the folk horror, the sort of supernatural horror, the kind of Algernon Blackwood nature stories, the Willows, things like that, where it's all about very rural experiences I've experienced. But also I'm interested in things like the forest, how we interpret forests, what kind of mythology around forests, and across Europe, I guess, as well. But also, I was going to mention I'm reading a book about the life of a tree, and basically all of that is just horrible. It's just things struggling, lots of saplings dying. How hard it is to be a tree. I don't think there's much of a difference between so someone writing horror and the experience trees have. I think that's.
You have
So-
send me the link to that book, definitely. Look.
Yes, it's. Well, actually, I mentioned a fun little thing. I was bought the book by my partner Vicky. It's written by a German guy who looks after a forest in Germany, obviously. And I mentioned the book to my neighbour's son, who is he's quite sort of crafty and likes woodland and things, and he mentioned yeah I've read that. I said, oh, how'd you do it? And he said Audible. Well, I've got the book.
What's the title of that book? Is it The Hidden Life of Trees?
I think it's The Hidden Life of Trees. Yeah. There's it's a really good book. There's also a really good book called The Law of the Forest, which is it's Alexander Orteus, I think it is, which my friend Jack, who I'll mention, edited this book called Being the Paranormal, recommended to me. There's also some really good stories. I'll mention a little bit after this because otherwise I'll go off on a tangent. But I think I'm fascinated by how the mythology sort of tangles through books you wouldn't think have it. So yeah, I'll read this short section. It's from the foreword by Paul Devereux. And so it starts with that his wife Charla and I were driving along a lonely country road during a fieldwork research session for a planned book on worldwide lore relating to beliefs about spirit routes passing through the physical landscape. We were trying to geographically map generations-old accounts of fairy paths we'd uncovered in the Thurberton Folklore records of University College Dublin. We were on our way to the next location on our UCD list in County Mayo to see what we could find. What we could find in the way of a local memory about a fairy path belief at a particular place there. We came to a Y junction in a narrow road. There was no road sign, and unsure of which direction to take, we slowed to a walking pace and proceeded cautiously onto the right-hand fork. A level sward of grass occupied the triangle of land between this fork of the road and the left-hand one. Suddenly, standing on the grass, there was a figure between 2 and 3 feet tall. It was anthropomorphic and fully three-dimensional, as we could clearly determine why we were drifting slowly past. It sprung into appearance out of nowhere, and it caught my wife's and my own transfixed attention simultaneously. The figure comprised of a jumble of very dark green tones, as if composed of a tight, dense tangle of foliage, rather like the stand of woodland 100 yards or so beyond the sward of grass. It didn't seem to quite have a face, just a head with deep-set eyes peering out of the green tangle. It presented a distinctly forbidding appearance. As we crawled past in our car, the figure started to turn its head in our direction, but then vanished. Charla called out, "Oh shit!" We looked at each other, both of us wide-eyed and thoroughly disconcerted. "You saw that?" I asked rhetorically. The whole episode had lasted only about half a minute or so, but it was unquestionably an actual, if transient, objective observation. So, had we just witnessed that ancient folkloric motive of the Green Man? And it's not a massive jump then from that to LTC Rolt's the shouting, where some kids go into the field and go into some woodland, and guy goes in, he sees this big face. Yeah.
Good stuff. Now, Amanda, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that would give me nightmares.
Yeah, and that's in kind of a fairly objective book on the paranormal experience, and this guy was just going, I was just going around, and then I just saw the thing. How do I deal with that?
Oh, who knows indeed, mate. So, God, crazy stuff, man. No, I think that's probably enough today. Well, you're going to enjoy your cup of coffee now tonight, mate. Obviously, let you do the plug for yourself, then. Obviously, because you've done a number of albums and they will help you straight away. So, where can people find your music, first of all?
Well, they can find it at Plenty Wenlock. I think it's plentywenlock.bandcamp.com. Plenty Wenlock Records, I think it is. Wayside and Woodland as well, which is Wayside and Woodland Recordings. Just YouTube, Spotify, places like that. There's one album that's Welsh. It's called Ty, and that's a lot of it's about the Mabagainian Welsh folklore. There's a song called The Show of Ankh, and the Ankh was the mythical lake creature that got dragged in chains to a lake, I think up Snowdon, because the folk of the village didn't like it. So yeah, there's it did some really horrible things as well. So yeah, there are lots of stories sort of woven into that.
You've had one of your short stories published as well, haven't you? As well as intro call.
Yes, there's a website called Horrified, which has just come back, and there was a collection of stories called folk horror, folk stories from Horrified. It was collection 2, and that was called the Colosseum. It's about 2 people going to a coastal town and being effectively frozen in time for a night. So yeah, there's that. And I'm writing a few more stories. I'm trying at the moment to finish a story called The Hall of the Forest, in which because there is a place bizarrely near Anchor, just Shropshire Powys border, called the Hall of the Forest. I thought, well, that sounds amazing. I wonder what that place is like. And I went there, and it's, I don't know, nondescript. It's just a road. So I'm trying to write a story where people go. Sorry, someone, my sort of protagonist, sort of walks around the woodland and finds this place, which is effectively like a woodland sort of church or cathedral or something that feels reverential. Yeah, get lost and then find this place, get overcome by a place. So yeah, but I was going to also just very quickly mention that there's stories that I've been reading in all sorts of odd books. There was one book, I'll put the link in the notes. But it was written by a guy who was I think he was an MP. He brought up in Llansamfraid, which is a village just over there, a bit over there. And then he writes about how the Welsh are very, well, especially at that time, the Welsh villagers and people were still hanging on to the fairies very much, and that they were very, very live, the fair folk, the Twyleth Teg. So I named one of my earliest tracks, Glad Twyleth Teg, which is the land of the fair folk, land of the fairies. He writes about how he goes to. It's because he's writing about going around Wales, and he goes to this railwayman's. I think into his garden. He's coming past, and the railman is still in his uniform, and he's lit a fire, and the railman comes to him. Sorry, and he's still in uniform, and they talk, and this. He mentions that his daughter's died, because his daughter had died from a long illness, and then sort of talks for a while about the fact that his daughter had been very weak, and so they put her in the window, sort of, I think it may be a bay window or something, to be able to, and she kept seeing the fairies. She kept seeing the fairies come out of the thicket, and she kept talking about them, and then when she died, they were comforted by the idea that she was there. She was just over the road. And it's one of the most affecting things. It's written so beautifully and devastatingly but it's just, yeah, she kept seeing it. She kept seeing them. She kept waving. She kept talking about them, and then she's there. It's all right. It's all right. It's sad that she's gone, but we know that she will always be there looking back.
Wow.
I thought that's probably a weirdly lovely way to end.
Yeah, I guess. Doesn't. It's a great way of wrapping up today as well, mate. So I want to thank you again for this today, Eric. Definitely been an absolute pleasure, man. I've really enjoyed this, and I think you've enjoyed it as well. So we'll get you on again for part 2 of this when you've got some more stories you want to share with us again, mate. Definitely.
Sure, yeah, sure.
Been a pleasure, mate. Definitely. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Eric. We will see you all soon. Yeah, guys. See you soon.
Cloaked in the shadows.